All right, so now let's go ahead and add this into our simulation. So there's a couple of things I want to do. Let's make sure that we're viewing our fireball simulation. And I'm going to add in another collision for the rocks. So let's just go to our rocks and let's throw down a null after our cache. And we're going to use, we can call this out. And with our fireball stop selected, I'm going to go in and choose deforming object, the shelf tool, collisions, and press enter in there. And it's going to create the same thing. It's going to create a VDB. So let's go and make sure we've got enough resolution. Go to a frame that we're viewing all these rocks. And let's view this collision source, or view the VDB. There we go. Make sure everything is, proper resolution, so we can use this to collide with our fluid. Looks about good. Let's go in and double check that in our fireball simulation and how that put that in. And it added another static object node. The difference in the deforming object is it just uses deforming geometry, which is telling it to use the animation that we're giving it. And then we're re-evaluating to interpolate correctly the geometry. And we don't really need to change anything there. We just know we're getting collisions. Okay. And if we just kind of view this node, let's go to another frame. Okay. Let's just kind of double check everything. Physical attributes are fine. Okay. If we take a look at the collision division size, it should be fine. Okay, so that's just for the colliders there, but really what we want to do is we want to add in another volume source. So what we want to do is I'm going to just copy our fireball source here, copy all these nodes to make it just kind of easy, and let's paste that in our rocks. And we want to hook that up to our null out here. And now we're creating an emitter off this called outBurned. And so let's take this down to something really, really simple here. So obviously we're scattering points along our rocks here. We're still adding in the burn temperature fields, and we're adding in density. Great. I know I'm probably only going to use the density. Well, we might use the temperature as well. Okay, so we don't necessarily need any noise since these are pretty small. I'm going to turn the noise off, but I do want to add a trail sop. So the trail sop is going to have it calculate velocity in its movement. Select compute velocity. So we've now got velocity off those points. We're not going to use the point velocity at all. We're not going to add any other velocities off of these points. Let's just add that trail. So we're going to get the motion off of them, but we don't want to add any extra turbulence kind of off the emitter. And then we're going to rasterize all that. And let's just bring everything in, burn, temperature, density, and particle scale. I want this to be kind of small. I don't want to be emitting these huge. I just want to reduce the amount of the scale so it's not like super fat, just kind of smaller. And that's pretty much it. So we've pretty much just added in another setup of emission. And now we can go into our fireball simulation. Let's copy and paste this volume source. And let's just set this up to be our new, call it rocks. And we're going to need to merge in these new emitters now, or this new emitter. So if we just kind of grab this, so we're merging these two emitters here. So under the rocks, let's change what we're bringing in here. So our fireball source, note we want our rocks here. Rocks outburned. That's what we want to bring in. And I just want to, let's just start from scratch here. Clear all those nodes. What do we want to bring in here? Well, I know I want to bring in density. I'm going to bring in density. And we're going to add that we're going to boost it up. I want to make sure we're bringing in and we're going to emit a lot of density. So we're going to emit 3.5 off of this density parameter. We're going to make sure we're going to get a lot of density off the emitter. Okay, well, let's bring in velocity, V and vel. Let's copy that over. That's going to grab all the movement off of that. And let's bring in temperature. Temperature is going to add some more interest. It's going to give it some buoyancy. And that's it. So now we've got our rock source. We're bringing in the velocity from the rocks and we're adding density and temperature. So with that in mind, let's kind of go back to our camera and let's see how well this is really going to break it up. We've got a collision and we're adding in velocities and density off these new emitters. I might reduce the overall voxel size a little bit just to kind of quicken things up. All right, let's take a flipbook of this. All right, so here's our last flipbook, and it's really starting to add some more detail here. You can really see we've got these cool bits of kind of debris that are coming out. So I just want to make a few changes, and we're really able to iterate really fast here. And this new sparse solver is really a game changer. You're able to, this took about half the amount of RAM as the previous solver, plus is twice as fast, and we can really get some high detail and fast iterations while making all these changes. So let's just make a couple more changes in the emitter. I think I'm not going to add any more temperature out of these bits of debris. I just want to add density, and so I'm just going to keep it even more simple. Let's just go back to the rocks here. And I'm going to turn the temperature field to none, so we're not adding any temperature. And I really just need to kind of dial in these parameters. But I really like the breakup in the emitters here. And one thing, I'm going to offset the cache of these emitters. And I don't want them to start at the beginning. I want to have them come in just after the main plume of the emission here. So I'm going to kind of offset the cache. So if we go to our rocks, I just want to have them come maybe 30 frames. So I'm going to throw down a time shift after our cache here. And I want these rocks to start exploding just after the main plume starts. So I'm going to type in an expression $F minus 30. So now, if we just kind of take a look at the cache, nothing's going to start for 30 frames. So this is going to offset that and probably break that up a little bit more. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to our object. Let's hide this. And finally, I'm going to add one more layer of detail within our simulation here. I'm going to add another shredding. I'm going to add a gas shred. And I just know this from previous simulations. And this is another technique I like to layer in there as well. And I'm going to add the gas shred. I'm going to modify the temperature through shredding. And so this is really going to break up those details even further. And it's a pretty sensitive parameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the scale. I've found a value of 0.12 to just be enough breakup, but without, this can really change the look of your simulation. So I'm just trying to break it up even further, give it more detail, but not too much. You'll really be able to tell really quickly when you're using too much of this parameter. And finally, the width, like the scale of the squash and stretch. So because I know my final resolution is going to be around 0.1 or something around there, I can push this parameter around the same as that as well. So I'm going to leave that at 0.1. So all we've done is we've offset the rock's source to start a little bit after our main explosion, and then we've added in this gas shred overall on top of everything in the temperature. So with that in mind, let's go ahead now, and I'm going to increase the cache memory of my simulation. So because I've got 64 gigs of RAM in my computer, I'm going to set this to about 50. And I just want to play it through the timeline for 100 frames and hold it there so I can then take a look and see the explosion from all angles. So I just want to cache the timeline through this as well. So I'm going to go ahead and play this forward.